Hola, ciao, ni hao, bonjour, konnichiwa. 5 languages, one simple idea. Your players, they don't all speak English, and they shouldn't have to. So, it is time for some freaking cool indies trivia. What percentage of Steam users worldwide have English set as their primary language? 93%, 63%, or 33%? If you guessed 33%, congratulations, friend. You have just uncovered one of the biggest blind spots in indie game marketing. And if my math is correct, that means 2/3 of the world's largest PC audience wants games in another language. And today, we're going to show you how to reach them. So join me in welcoming Yana Tarasevich from Alconost, a studio that helps developers bring their games to players all across the globe. And with the right approach, localization can double your wishlist growth, reduce support issues, and become one of the highest ROI moves in your entire dev cycle. And in this episode, you're going to hear the business case study for localization and why translating even just your store page and trailer is one of the fastest ways to boost visibility, when localization should fit in your dev timeline, and the technical prep that you need to do so that localization does not become a nightmare. And lastly, where AI helps, where it breaks things, and how to use it without sacrificing quality. So, if you've ever wondered whether localization is worth it for your indie game, this episode will give you those answers. Welcome to Freaking Cool Indies. Okay, Yana, thank you so much, first and foremost, for jumping on and talking with me today about localization. I am actually so excited to talk about this topic. This is one that I personally have wanted to dig a little bit deeper into. Actually, in a past life, I worked as a QA analyst for a translation company. So again, not to say I have a ton of experience in it, but I do recognize the importance of bringing a game or bringing a piece of art to a more global audience. And again, I'm really excited to kind of dissect that a little bit more with you. But to start things off, I actually want to start with just kind of the business case of localization. So why does localization even matter, and why should a dev even just start to consider this as part of their overall strategy? So I wanted to first ask you, for an indie developer, even one maybe with a tighter budget, why should they even consider localization? Again, what's the business case for it, and what are developers missing out by staying as English only?
Hi, I would like to thank you for inviting me, because for me, this topic, the topic of localization for games especially, is really an important one, because I see how many game developers are kind of missing out on localization sometimes, and especially for indie games, some don't really consider it important enough, or some consider it like some distant future, which sometimes comes, sometimes not. And what I really would like to highlight here is that localization is something that you the earlier you start to think about it, the better it comes out in the end. And why, as for your question, why do you need to consider it in the first place, is well, it's a matter of statistics, actually. Like, only 36% of games on Steam are played in English. So by staying English only, you miss like more than half of the gamers in the world. So this is something to consider. And of course, players sometimes in all over the world, they play games in English. But the truth is that people enjoy games more when they play them in their native language. And a lot of studies prove this point. And sometimes, especially if you have a heavily narrative game, you want to have some emotional connection with a player. You want to give them something to feel, something to consider, and in their native language, they will connect to the game in a far more better way than when playing it in English. Because in English, some idioms some references wouldn't reach the player as well as they can. So this is another point here. And again, going back to a simple business case, when you do localization, localized games get better promoted at stores in specific regions. For instance, if you have your game translated into several European languages, so in regional European stores, they will get better promotion, better highlighting. So this is what you can also consider when considering your marketing strategy.
Very cool. And just to confirm, you said 36% of games are played in English. So again, it's like I would say the vast majority then is in different languages.
Yeah, and the major share is actually Chinese, so 27%, which is really close to English if
Wow.
you think about that. So, of course, it is not really easy to localize content into Chinese because you need not only localization, but sometimes you need the support of some local publishers to get published in their stores. And so it may seem more complicated than, for example, localizing into European languages in European locales. But if you consider the share, like 27%, again, maybe it's worth it. Then comes such languages as Russian, which is popular in CIS countries still, and which has 9% of the share in 2025. So it's also an opportunity to consider. And one of the rising stars of localization recently, I would say, is Portuguese Brazilian, which has an interesting history about it because mostly Portuguese Brazilian localizations were not that good historically, and many players just historically played in English. But the situation started to change recently, and well, now is kind of a rising market, which is a good thing to consider as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I know for many years, and maybe there's a correlation, but I know for many years, video games in Brazil have always been incredibly expensive. Like I remember
Yeah.
reading an article that even when I think it was during the PS3 era, PS2s were selling more in Brazil, like from a price standpoint, than what it costs in Canada or US or Europe. And again, I know that may play a role in just kind of less people are able to access the game, so
Yeah.
there's going to be less demand. But hopefully that is turning around. But yeah, very, very, very interesting.
Well, and
And
maybe
oh
one more point here to consider.
yeah,
Yeah, we will be talking about AI today, definitely. So maybe
hmm
I just should go on with it. So in this AI era, you really have an opportunity to cut the costs. So if we're talking about indie developers and indie games, maybe 5 years ago, localization was kind of like too expensive. But today, when you can cut up to like 50% of the cost of localization per language, this is something really that opens new horizons to developers to think about it.
yeah, and I guess like we can actually probably start that conversation maybe a little bit earlier because again I am very, very intrigued by AI, and I guess maybe just even where it sits in this localization standpoint, because obviously a big part is, okay, if I'm a game developer and I want to just use AI to translate everything, again, very quick and easy way of doing it. But what is a developer missing by going the route of AI? And again, just kind of using ChatGPT as opposed to using a company like Alconost to be able to actually translate their game and get that in a, I don't know, maybe more correct state.
Yeah, that's a completely fair question. So, because actually I'm attending game dev conferences, and I often hear that like translation is like a closed question. So it just will be AI done by AI. So no need for human anything. And this is for me is the greatest mistake that developers make because any translation, well, localization is not just translation of word to word translation. So it's also adapting your game. It's also making you it's captivating and understandable. And this is what AI sometimes misses. Also, what is missing usually when game developers come to Alconost, for example, already having done AI translation, they just get their like text assets, strings they have in the game, they get it translated, but they do not consider how the context of how the strings are used in the game. So there may be a great difference of how even the word cancel is translated based on whether it's a button or whether it's part of the menu, or so it may have like up to 3 or 4 translations in different languages, so depending on the language. So sometimes I see that no context was provided to AI, and no context was in any way made clear in the prompt. And this leads to basically a translation that should be redone. Another thing is keeping consistency of character names, for example, of items, of things like that. And for that, you need a glossary. So this is another thing that a company like mine, like Alconost, can help you with. When you have just the strings, you need to get the names of your main characters. You need to get the names of your main items. You maybe need the names of quests, something like that, and you need them to be consistent throughout the game, because otherwise your players just won't understand where to go, so what to do and who to address, for example. So this is another mistake that I see often when we talk about AI translations, which it's not really a mistake, it just is not considered in the prompt, is not considered when AI translation is done, and this is why AI sometimes is not really usable. So and one more thing here maybe to highlight is that any translation, AI or human translation, actually in a game, it needs QA stage. So as a QA analyst, I think you understand why, because a lot of things may go wrong. Some strings are too long, some strings are too short, some characters not translators or AI translation is not clear on the agenda, and it can break the game and it can break the immersion, and this is what you want to get with localization usually.
Very, very interesting. So I guess to confirm then, there is a difference between translation and localization, right? I think a lot of people do think of them as kind of one and the same, but from the sounds of it, there is still a very big difference between the two.
Sometimes these notions can coincide when we are talking about some very simple texts, maybe some UI elements, which still should be localized, even for different platforms in one language sometimes. But it may be the case that you just do word-to-word translation. But mostly localization means that you need to adapt to the culture, to the perception of the locale you're localizing in. So that is why sometimes for languages like Spanish, for example, you need to do localization not just in Spanish, but you need to do localization for different regions. So you need to consider the region you're localizing for. So it is especially important for narrative games, I would say, because if you have some small puns, if you have some references, they should be adopted in such a way so that they are understood by the target audience, and so that the target audience really enjoys them, so gets them and enjoys them. So these are different things, translation and localization.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, and again, just to kind of clarify, double check. So when we're talking about more of a narrative style game, a game that's heavy on story, that's where you want to bring in localization, because again, we're not just changing the text, but we're looking at like, what is the meaning behind the text and how would I say this in a different language, as opposed to, let's just say it's something where it's like a very minimal story. It's just like a top-down shooter type of thing. That could be a game where you could just straight translate the text, because we're only looking to change, what the menu looks like and how to get the person in the game, and maybe the tutorial, if you will. But besides that, there's not going to be a ton of text on the screen.
Well, actually, yes. I would say that it is even evident in how, in the quality of AI output in translation. So the more narrative your game has, the more difficult it is for AI to grasp every aspect of it, to grasp all the connections. So in my opinion, saying that, I just want to add that even if your game is not heavy on narrative, it just has so many buttons and it is still makes sense and is still worth it to localize the menu, and to localize, for example, the onboarding, the references, the tutorials, or the trailer, because this is actually like the first step that we usually recommend to localize, to have localized store page, to have localized marketing materials, and also to have localized UI. So it's a basic minimum of what makes the player more comfortable in the game when they understand where to go, what button to push, and so you don't need to have a lot of narrative to consider localization. So any game can be localized. But as for heavily narrative games, again, the more narrative you have, the more maybe human expertise you will need.
And I know you had kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning of, you should be starting pretty early on, but I just wanted to talk about timing quickly. So, like, when would the right time be for an indie dev to consider localization? Again, should this be before launch, early access, after they kind of see that their game is gaining some traction, and hey, maybe I can open up a new avenue? Like, when would you recommend that someone puts this into their strategy overall?
So when I said that it is worth it to consider localization from the very beginning, I meant that sometimes you want to you want to make sure that all the elements of your game, like the colors, the icons, the items, they are appropriate for some target audience you are hoping to gain in the future. So if you think about going to a Chinese market, you need to consider colors, for example, because color, let's say red, is not the same in for an English-speaking audience and for Chinese-speaking audience. For Chinese-speaking audience, it's red is a good color, basically, and for English-speaking audience, it's a color of danger, of threat, of an enemy team. So these are the things you need to consider from the very start when you're doing the design. One more thing to consider if you think you will be localizing your game is keeping all your texts in a separate file. So hard coding texts is something that will take a lot of effort to fix in the future if you want to do localization. So just from the very start, make sure that your texts are in a separate file so they can be updated, and so that the same files in different locales can be added, and that localization will be smooth from the technical point of view. So this is what I meant about thinking about it earlier. But if we're talking about when to start, like considering localization, like going to an agency or doing translations or something like that, so I would say that first of all, what you can do is you can localize, as I said, localize store page, localize some marketing materials like a trailer, and see how it goes. Yeah, you can see the traction, you can see the wish listing statistics, and usually at every store you can see it by country. So then you can see in which country your game has most traction, like most interest by the players, and you go from here, from that. So then you, at the next stage, for example, at an early access stage, you can go on with localizing UI, localizing menus, and, for example, a tutorial for players from these countries to be able to start playing and to give feedback. And this is, again, good time to consider 2 or 3 languages, maybe not too much, but some that have like the best momentum at the time. After you go to launch, so you need to see how it goes, really. So you need to maybe reach some sales points that you considered for yourself. And after that, you can see also the feedback of players who may ask to add some languages. And then you can go from that. So you add languages or expand localization based on the feedback. So this is like a beginning strategy, as I would say, but it wouldn't be the same for every developer, for every kind of game. Some games are very specific about their audience, about the market they are aimed at, and they can find resources for localization early on, but it's not always the case. So
That's very, very interesting. And I love the fact of starting off with a few ones, testing it out, seeing if the wish lists are growing, maybe more in Spain as opposed to Germany. And then, okay, perfect. I'm gonna double down and focus my efforts on getting this localized, even just to Spanish, because I know it can grow it that much. So I think that's very, very interesting, even just as a really not easy, but like a really great starting point.
yeah, because sometimes, game developers are perceiving localization as a kind of bet that you need to do, and you're then just hoping that it will pay off. But in fact, you can really unroll it at your own pace, starting with some materials, then adding up, and finally coming up with more languages or more materials to localize. So this
Yeah.
can be also a strategy.
Very cool. And I'm guessing that let's say you have your trailer and your Steam page, like you have the assets to have it localized in, let's just say Spanish, Italian, and German, for example. If I'm someone who's going on Steam, the German Steam, I'm guessing the trailer that is being fed to me will be in the localized German. Like you can kind of upload, okay, this is the German one, this is the Spanish one. Like Steam kind of handles all of that on their end as well.
Yeah, yeah, this is what will happen. So, for example, I've got a game which is not localized in any languages yet. So it's an indie game which has only English, which is in English, but it really has a localized store page already, and has, I'm not sure about the trailer, but the store page is really it's already localized, and I see it in my language. And even though the game is English only for now, it still gets my attention, so it will get more attention. As far as I know, the statistics is it's about 30 to 50% more interest from outside English-speaking market if you localize only the store page and the marketing assets. So it really brings you some sunshine, which you may use, which may pay off in the future.
Yeah, and again, I'm guessing in a lot of non-English speaking countries, it is kind of accepted that okay, the main game might be in English, but again, just having that store page is enough to pique some more interest and be like, okay, they kind of they care about us.
Yeah, that's actually the point here. So localization is really a lot about caring, because people mostly can play games in English. But when they see localization, they understand that the developer really cared about this immersion, about this emotional connection, about the comfort of the player. So for me, when I see like localization in one of my native languages, it always is a good sign for me, even if it's only a localized store page. So at least I understand that if I play this game in English and I like it, I can leave my feedback and ask to localize it in my language. So it will help in the future.
Okay, so Yana, I am an indie dev. I am bought in on localization. I'm going to test a few markets. I'm going to see how this all goes. But before I even kind of considering, teaming up with a company like Alconost, what are some of the technical preparations that I should start to think about? Some of the things that I need to get ready. Again, I know you spoke about hard coding. That is going to be one of the bigger ones, I'm guessing. But what are just some of the other technical side of things that I can start to think about to make sure that my game is localization ready for when that conversation starts?
Yes, sure. So hard coding we have already discussed. So you need to have your strings for localization. So your text basically for localization in some separate file, which can be shared, which can be replaced with a localized file in any language. Another thing is the use of placeholders and the actual like quality of text inside this file. So by placeholders, I mean so the variables which are used instead of numbers instead of names of characters, for example, instead of items. So why it is important? Because if you are talking about English, English is a language with kind of a few inflections. So you don't have very many inflections for gender, or for just two inflections for number. So you can have only like plural and singular. But in many languages, the situation is completely different. So you need to be able to put a name of your character instead of a placeholder, and make sure that it fits the rest of the sentence it is used in. So this is another thing to consider. And in the light of this, it is also important to keep the texts in whole sentences, I would say. So what I often see when I start on a localization project is that you have a phrase like you have 5 coins, for example, and then the developer does the following. So they put you have in one string, they put 5 as a placeholder, as a variable in the second string, and you have coins in the third string. And if you want to do localization, you need to understand that in German, for example, the word order in the sentence will be completely different. So you won't be able to translate this phrase the same way it is in English. So these are the things I would consider from technical standpoint. And from more like a preparation standpoint, I would also consider making some kind of localization brief or guideline on your characters and on your items. That would help a lot to translators if you do human translation. This can also be prompted and using a prompt if you do AI translation. So in any case, it is important to describe your characters, at least to describe what gender they are, what they do, how they connect to each other, and maybe to give some references like pictures. This is like the perfect version of style guide that I would always want to get from a game developer.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. And for the actual document itself, is it just an Excel document, a Google Sheets? Like it's kind of as simple as that with, hey, here's
Yep.
the text, and then we have it broken down again between Spanish, German, Italian, Japanese, anything that you want to kind of localize it to?
Yes, actually, it can be this. So localization in spreadsheets is still kind of popular. We don't really do translation in the spreadsheets anymore because we use special platforms for that, which take into account glossaries, which take into account the previous translations and make sure that everything is consistent within translation of one game, for example. But for the developer, it still can look like a spreadsheet with all the columns, every description they want to have in there.
Awesome. That's wicked. All right, Yana. Next, I want to jump into some of the more, harder numbers, right? Budgets, timelines, all that good stuff. Because once again, I'm a developer. I am fully bought in. I think what you are talking about sounds perfect for what I'm trying to build. But I'm just a solo dev. I'm maybe a small team, and I'm worried that I can't go and start working with a localization team just from budgetary reasons. So can you help us get more of a realistic budget for localization? Let's just say we want to start with 2 or 3 languages. And then also on top of that, what are some of the factors that would affect cost? And how can a developer kind of estimate what that overall spend is going to look like?
Sure. So the first factor which is the most important and which uh, actually affects every quote we make is the word count. So this is still the thing. So maybe someday localization will be based only on hourly efforts put in by translators, but it's not the thing right now. So we still keep to the word count. So you need to understand how many words are in your game. So it really depends mostly on that. So for some games which are not heavy on narrative, it may be about 1,000, 1,500 words, and it's okay. So it's just UI and menus and It's really not a big amount. So in this case, the cost would go from like 80 to $150 per language, depending on the language, because some languages are a bit more expensive than the others. If your game is heavier on narrative, it has dialogues, it has some instructions, some tutorials, some things like that. So it increases the word count, and the higher is the word count, the more it would cost. Another thing I always ask developers to consider is localization quality assessment. So when the game is translated and you have implemented the translations in the game, so you need to give it to somebody to check it for any errors, any mistakes in context, or maybe technical mistakes like hanging strings or something like that, so that you make sure that your translation really looks the part and really does what it should do. So the LKA stage usually also costs about 15 to 20% of the localization cost. So this also depends on how long your gameplay actually is. So these are the two main things I would say that affect the cost, but we are talking here about human translation. So if we're going again to AI translation, for now, a lot of companies, Alconost included, we provide the service which is called machine translation post editing. So when we invite human translators to reread and edit translations done by AI. So for that, the costs may drop considerably by 40% sometimes by 50%. It depends on the language. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the type of game. Also, for some games, it just wouldn't work if they are full of puns and references and you want to keep them all. Maybe you should go for human translation. If you have something simpler, then this may be your option. And actually, this is what helps, as I've said before, what helps to save budget, and what helps indie developers who don't have too much budget allocated for localization to do it for at least like 2 or 3 languages.
Yeah, that's actually very, very interesting. And for the AI powered one, is still your company, is Alcona still the one who's running the translation and then having someone on their team review it, or is it like, hey, I'm an indie dev, I've already ran it through ChatGPT, here's like what I got so far, can you kind of proofread it?
So it can be both, actually. There are
Okay.
2 options. What we usually do with AI translations brought to us by the customer, we usually, first thing we do, we estimate the quality, because as I said, sometimes when developers do AI translation, they do not consider the things that we consider. So they do not consider the glossary or the context, and sometimes AI translations done by the customer are not usable. In this case, what we usually propose is to do AI translation by several different engines, but this time by using our prompt, by using the glossary, by using the references, the style guide provided by the customer, and then we offer our linguists to estimate which engine actually did the best job. So we have about 9 to 11 engines which do this like sample. And from the sample, a linguist says, okay, so this engine did the best job. I will be okay with proofreading that translation. So, and this is the engine we go for to translate the whole amount of words the customer has. And after that, we do the proofreading. So this is kind of how the scheme works at the moment.
That's awesome. And again, I every time you're talking about the AI translation, the whole thing, I just think back of my school days when in Canada here, we French is our second language, but every obviously I didn't have ChatGPT back in my day, but we had Google Translate and things like that, and everyone would just copy and paste their English one into Google Translate, push it on, and instantly, like, the teacher, within the first 2 sentences, the teacher's like, this is just not right at all. And it's
Yeah.
again,
So
very, very easy, I think, to fall into that trap.
I actually like worked as a translation teacher at university, and you wouldn't believe what I have seen in my years there. So it was kind of the same. Yeah. So some students just didn't care to do too much of a homework, and they just did
Yeah.
the same. And I got like about like translations, like similar translations. They were just all the same
Yeah.
because they were copied from the same Google Translate. Because at the
Yeah.
time that we didn't have. So now with GPT, actually, the thing is that translation would be different. Maybe if even if like 5 students do translation by GPT, it may be different because every time the output will be different. But
Yeah.
so this is, on one hand, it's like a blessing of AI that it is different every time. On the other hand, for translations, it is really, really hard to make it consistent. So even with the prompts, when you're giving the glossary and the things to consider for the AI when doing translation, you still need a human eye, a human touch to make sure that everything was considered.
And Yana, this is solely out of we don't have to spend too much time on this question, but this is just solely out of my own interest. What are the more expensive languages? Because I think you had said some languages are more expensive than the other. So I guess like it's like what are like the cheapest ones, and then what are the most expensive? Again, we don't have to spend too much time. I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah, it actually like depends on the um, level of wealth of the country, I would say, of the region where the language is used. Like the most expensive language is Japanese. Maybe not the most expensive, but in this tier is always Japanese, and also the languages of Northern Europe. So these are
Okay.
the countries where the quality of life is high, so the salaries need to be high, and translators to like earn their living, they need to have high rates. So they just can't go on with lower rates, so they wouldn't survive in this case. So this is how
Yeah, that makes sense.
the
Yeah.
industry works. So, and the lowest rates would probably be the CIS countries, Russian, Ukrainian, I would say the Central Europe maybe too. And recently, the with the like the coming of AI, the common languages like French and Spanish and Italian, which are often the first choice of everybody to localize in, they
Yeah.
also become cheaper just because the AI engines have so much content to learn from that
Yeah.
for these languages, AI works better than for the rest of them. So
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And now, from a timing perspective, how long does all of this take? And again, I understand that it's going to be dependent on what language are you choosing? Are we how many languages are we doing? The length of the game. So let's just say we're taking like a 2,000 word game. It's not there is still some story to it. It's not crazy overly complex, but it's just something that's more of like a middle ground game, or let's maybe call it like an average indie game, 5-10 hours of kind of playtime.
So actually, I would say that the time span doesn't really depend on the number of languages. You can localize in 3 languages and in 10 languages, and maybe when you're coming to like 15, it may make a difference because you will have obviously at this moment like different time zones for translators, and you will need to allocate a bit more time to connect maybe to translators to get some results from there. So there may be some kind of ping at this point. But when you're talking about like 3 to 10 languages, there is no difference because the translation is done simultaneously in every language. So they are done in parallel, and they do not depend on each other. So if we're talking about a game which has about 2,000 words of content, I would say that 2,000 words of content is really something that can be localized in 2 to 3 business days. So this is actually with all the preparation, with the preparation of the glossary. Maybe it will take a bit much time if So translators need to go into the game which has already been released and need to spend some time there and to play it and to feel it. But generally, I would say like 2 to 3 business days. Then we go to quality assessment to LQA stage, which if we're talking about 10 to 15 hours of gameplay, so it may take about another like 2 to 3 business days just to arrange the bug log sheets or something like that. So all in all, for a game of such like middle size, maybe, I would say it would take about a week or so. So it can be done in a week. So if you want to do it in a week, if you have more time, but you also need to consider here that when translations are done, you also need some time to implement them in the game. So to make a build of the game. So yeah, so this may also take some time. So now I'm talking about the time span on our side, on the translation agency side. As a developer, you need to consider this preparation stage when you make this file, when you make this style guide, when you maybe describe your characters, your items, and so on. And you then need to consider the translation stage. Then you need to consider the implementation stage, and then go on with QA. So these are the 4 major stages I would consider in terms of time.
Yeah, I was actually surprised of how fast the turnaround time of the actual translation was. And again, I fully recognize that. I would say the majority of the time is coming in preparation and it's coming in implementation, right? That's kind of those are the two big bookends of it all. But yeah, very fast and very efficient, I would say,
Yeah,
to
well,
to actually get the game translated.
actually, like if you're prepared really well, so the translation will go on smoothly. And if you have a good style guide, your translators just will not have so many questions about the strings, what this means and what this means, and is it a button or is it something. So if you have it at least in the keys of your strings in some way described, or if you have it in your style guide, or if you're ready to provide quick answers to translators, this can go really fast. So
And I'm guessing when it comes to working with Alchemist, like you guys are also providing everything that the developer is going to need, so that they can kind of go in and just start filling in the details themselves. But I'm sure that you guys are giving
yeah,
them some
yeah.
form of template or some form of system, so that it makes their life a lot easier as well.
Yeah, we have a template of localization brief, which we always ask to fill in and we don't really start working without it, because really it doesn't pay off to do work and then to redo it again with the new context. So it is always better to prepare first and go on with translation when you are prepared. So as a translator myself, because I always also do some translation still for the games, it is really always very rewarding to work on a well-prepared project.
I know that feeling in many facets of my job, but when things start off nice and clean and ready, that typically that sees its way through to the project as well. You know, making sure everyone's bought in, everyone knows what they're doing and what we're working on, and that's it's always a very nice feeling when you're able to hit publish on a project like that.
Yes, it's always a dream. It's always what we intend to do. Of course, there are some questions rising on the go. You can't avoid that. But uh, this is why translation agency sometimes is better than just translating by AI on your own, is because we have this expertise which of how to handle situation when something goes wrong. So when strings do not work, when placeholders do not fit, so we can just give some advice. Even though we're not developers, we can go and give some advice on how to handle situations like that. So this can also be important when you are doing localization for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything else that we might have missed? Is there any other mistakes that you often see? Anything else that you just kind of wanted to talk about, Yana, before as we kind of approach the end of the podcast?
So I think we have covered most of them. So we covered hard coding. I would also mention this maybe lack of visuals, because it's always important to see what you're talking about. So what kind of item it is you're translating a name for example, what kind of character you're dealing with, because sometimes English can be really very neutral, and it can be neutral in terms of gender, it can be neutral in terms of even in terms of number. You can't really always understand what would the player see on the screen. So it is important to give translators as much context as possible, and that is why I'm really always grateful to developers who answer our questions, who allocate some time to go through translators' questions and give this context, because this is what really makes the difference, and what makes localization really, really good. Because without understanding the context, is really a game of guessing, and when you're guessing, sometimes you just don't guess right. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Yana, before we wrap up, two final things. Number one, where can the people find more about you? Where can the people, learn more about Alconost, and maybe if you even just want to give a quick rundown of the company and other ways that they can help, and where you guys really do shine.
So we do have a website where you can read about all of our services, all the services we provide, and also see the case studies, which I guess is important for every developer, just to see an example of how it can go and what it can bring to the table, what we can bring to the table. So it's alconost.com, the first thing you want to visit. Then you can also follow us on LinkedIn, and follow our CEO, Alexander Muravsky, who is also doing a lot of work on providing more understanding of how we work now, especially in this AI age. So what we do and why developers and game developers especially still need localization in a localization agency. So you can learn from him a lot about what we bring to developers that work with us. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. So I'm not really a great poster, but when I see any initiatives by Alconost, some breakthrough that we are doing, and everybody's now on this path to understanding how to work in today's AI-based times. You can also follow me and connect. I would love to hear from game developers and to discuss what we can do for them.
And everything will be posted in the description below, or if you're not on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, you can also just hit over to the description tab, and you'll see all of the links again to the websites, to Yana, and to also anything else that you might need to help you on this localization journey. And finally, just to wrap things up, Yana, a very important part for me of this entire podcast is to also make sure that we are paying it forward and highlighting some of the amazing indie games and indie developers out there. So I wanted to ask you to shine a spotlight and pay it forward on, again, any indie project that you want to highlight, and one that you think the rest of the world should be seeing.
Well, I actually have a project in mind which is really very good for autumn and for this November, and for November leaves lying around, because it is actually called Leave It Alone. And it is a simulator of cleaning the autumn leaves in your backyard, and choosing some tools and upgrading these tools to clean it up. And it's really these kinds of games are really good for the season, and they're really good to make you a bit more relaxed at the end of the day. And it actually has some localization, even though the game has been released only 10 days ago. So at the end of October, it already features some localizations of, if you want to relax and clean some autumn leaves and hear to them rustling. So it's one thing. And the other thing, you can check out some localizations, see how they make a game better, how they can make a game better. So this is one of my latest favorites.
I love it. I just loaded up the Steam page, and first off, the name itself, Leaf It Alone, is so
Yeah.
good. And again, the trailer, the screenshots, what I've quickly seen of this looks very cozy and looks perfect for these like cooler autumn days. And once again, I think even just fall and autumn, right? Like that is something where in one part of the country here in Canada and I think in the US as well, we typically refer to it as fall. But in Europe, it's often, I believe, referred to as autumn, and even
Yeah.
that alone is a great example of how
Yes.
words can change depending on where is it that the person is taking it in. So perfect example right
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, Yana, thank you so much once again for jumping on and for helping us understand this entire landscape of translation and once again, I think not that I think I know what you guys and the team over sorry, let me redo that part there. Bum, bum, bum. Yana, thank you so much once again for jumping on the podcast, talking to us about localization, translation, some of the pitfalls or common pitfalls that you see some of the developers doing, and why people should be thinking about this as one of their strategies to help out their game be seen and be discovered. And again, I think that I know that this episode is going to be very helpful for many, many people. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for jumping on again. Once again, for anyone who wants to connect with Yana, who wants to learn more about Alconost, you can go ahead, check out the descriptions below, and everything will be linked there. And again, thank you so much, Yana. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So I really cherish this opportunity to talk and to be able to reach the game jam community. And I just invite everyone to connect and to ask any questions that you may have, because localization is something that really gives you a big boost. It can give you a big boost, and it's not something that you need to be afraid of, or I don't know. It's something that you need to consider at the end of the day if you want to develop, if you want to go forward. So please come and connect, and we will discuss specifically your game.
To all of our listeners out there, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day and week, and keep creating, keep being awesome, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye now.